Star Trek the Motion Picture is a beautiful film. To be quite honest, it is my favorite shot out of all of the Star Trek films. This and First Contact of the TNG crew. But Star Trek the Motion Picture holds this title mainly because, one, its use of colors, or lack of it sometimes, but mainly due to the split-focus diopter. A split-focus diopter is where you have two focal points instead of just one. This is a trait of Robert Wise, and he's used this since The Haunting, made in the 1960s. And he also used this extensively in the Andromeda Strain, made 7 years earlier to the motion picture. And that movie uses it even more, and I love it. The motion picture is a wonderful movie I love sitting through and enjoy thoroughly. I'm speaking mainly of the director's edition, which fixes many of the problems the original theatrical cut had, and I mean this genuinely. It moved things around, cut out many of the long sweeping shots of V'ger, added in more dialogue sequences, and one of those sequences that were added into the film actually turned out to be my favorite scene in the entire movie, and it's the sequence where Spock cries. At some point, we all turn to someone, a father, a brother, a god, and ask, "Why am I here?" I adore that line and that entire sequence, and you don't see it in the theatrical cut. That scene is not there. I do understand why people call this film the slow motion picture, especially the original theatrical cut. It is slow, especially compared to the films that followed, which are all amazing as well. And yes, I even like many things that are in The Final Frontier. Granted, that is probably the most flawed out of all of the original films by far, but I still even enjoy a lot of that. The director's cut to Star Trek the Motion Picture removes many of these long, lingering shots, so shots that just never cut to anything, or splices them up with more reaction shots, or even with voiceover stuff. Scenes which were not in the original cut of the film were added back in to break up those long sequences. And it does generally fix a lot, not all, of the original version's problems. It's just too bad that we'll never get this superior version, the director's edition, on Blu-ray, because the new effects sequences were only rendered in standard definition. Way to go, Paramount! The only version of the motion picture available on Blu-ray is the bogged-down original cut, which feels much more like a rough cut because in many ways it was. I won't get into the reasons why, but let's just say it was a mess of a production. And when the premiere happened, let's just say the film reels were still wet. The director's edition is actually shorter than the original cut, and it works to that film's benefit. But I'm not here to talk about that. The number one thing this movie does right is its sense of scale. And this is mainly done in the comparing of the sizes between the Enterprise and the V'ger. Which V'ger also changed sizes depending on which cut you watch. The movie starts off with 3 Klingon D6 or D7, I can't remember, battle cruisers fighting V'ger, but never do we really get a visual scale of V'ger. We certainly know it's big. We hear how big it is, and all of our characters constantly bring up how big and dangerous it is. We see V'ger destroy not only these 3 Klingon ships, but also the beautifully designed Epsilon 9, and we know this thing is a formidable enemy. But all of that is not really shown in full force. We just have the dialogue to help us out. It actually reminds me, simply because most of my audience is Godzilla related, it reminds me a lot of Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah in many ways. Godzilla is hardly in that film, but we feel his presence by listening to our characters, the characters that we genuinely like, constantly talking about him and music cues. This is V'ger in the motion picture in a nutshell. What we do see is the Enterprise refit in a sequence that goes on for far too long, by the way, where Captain Kirk and Scotty travel up to the Enterprise. The scene goes on for, I would have cut that by at least 4 minutes, and I can't believe I'm saying it's that long, but it is. But the key with that entire sequence, even though it is beautiful, and I don't care what you say, it is a beautiful sequence, it is shot like the Enterprise is this massive, giant ship, as it should be. It is a big ship. The original series, we never really got to feel how big the Enterprise was. And the motion picture was a great way for the creators to finally do this, and they understood that concept, and they definitely showed it off. Way too much, but they showed it off. Even when the Enterprise leaves dry dock, which I would have left that scene alone, I love that sequence, we, the audience, can't help but be in awe at how majestic and gigantic the Enterprise is. In fact, I would say the Enterprise refit from the motion picture is the most beautiful spaceship I have ever seen in a film. And then it meets V'ger. Again, we still don't quite understand how big and vast this thing is. We don't even know what it is. Other than that 12 power energy is being emitted from it. Something in which Sulu actually turns around and goes, 12 power? Like he can't believe it. Again, that goes into the whole idea of characters speaking about something instead of actually showing it. It's building up the anticipation. Again, Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah is probably my favorite example of this. We still don't quite understand how big V'ger is compared to the Enterprise, other than what is said. But it's being built up, including the music. Even listen to Jerry Goldsmith's music cue, which we'll talk about a little later. We feel the buildup of V'ger. We know that it's there. Including that awesome, it's called the blaster beam. It was an empty artillery shell that was hit. The blaster beam, it's a wonderful effect. I know it's made fun of by a lot of people, such as the Nostalgia Critic, but to me it's just so ominous and ugly and artificial that it fits V'ger perfectly, and I love hearing it every time, especially watching this film on 5.1 surround sound. It's such a great experience. This is a movie I would like to see in theaters, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. But then, as the Enterprise is brought into V'ger, we see a few shots of the Enterprise inside the craft itself. Just a tiny speck flying across this giant vessel. And I mean giant. And your mouth drops. The Enterprise, this big ship, as I just said before, that was built up as this giant, massive construction piece of humankind. The flagship of the Federation, the ship that everyone associates with Star Trek as being the best, is completely and utterly dwarfed by whatever V'ger is. Rarely has Star Trek done something like this. I can think of one other example from Deep Space Nine, where the Galaxy-class ship, which by the way is bigger than the Enterprise refit, combats the Dominion for the first time, and it is completely obliterated within minutes. Great episode. Deep Space Nine is by far my favorite of the television shows. This is an amazing action-based scale scene to gut-punch the audience into realizing that even the Enterprise from TNG might not be able to do anything against the Dominion. And it's a fantastic episode. Because that was building up this whole idea of TNG, where TNG, the Enterprise, is this awe-inspiring ship. It is the flagship of the Federation. It's huge, it's gigantic, it's home for many of us. And the idea of that is showing the Galaxy-class ship from Deep Space Nine getting utterly obliterated by the Dominion. Not only does that give a sense of forebodingness, but it also shows you that even if the Enterprise were to get involved with the Dominion War, it might not live. It raises the stakes. And that's what the motion picture does. But in a different way. While Deep Space Nine presented it in an action-packed aura, the motion picture is much more visual-based. It's slow. There's no real action in the motion picture, and there's no real necessarily driving conflict. There is, don't get me wrong. I mean, V'ger's heading to Earth and so on and so forth, which is one of the problems, by the way, with the motion picture, is that there's no real sense of, oh my god, this is a horrible, horrible, horrible thing. That's never really properly done in the motion picture, admittedly, but we're not here to talk about that. We see V'ger in the Enterprise, and we just realize that, my god, this thing could crush the Enterprise like a bug. And as Spock said, its only reason why the Enterprise is going through there is out of curiosity. Sheer and total curiosity. And it's true. They even try to escape V'ger's tractor beam, but they can't, or else the ship would literally buckle apart, as Scotty puts it. And even Kirk realizes this, and Kirk shuts down main engines to just save the Enterprise, because he realizes that it's futile, see what I did there, to try to break away from this massive vessel. It's basically doing whatever V'ger wants it to do. That's terrifying. That's actually terrifying, if you really think about it. And it just leaves your mouth wide open, realizing just how tiny the ship that we just saw as being this giant, majestic thing, is compared to what it's inside. And this is even done with Jerry Goldsmith's amazing music. The music swells with the Enterprise, and it's beautiful and majestic. It's big, it's bombastic, it's gorgeous. And then you go to the music which plays for V'ger, and it's dark, it's brooding, then explosive when we see how small the Enterprise really is. Because that's what the audience is feeling. My God, they're so small compared to that of V'ger. To me, this is effective filmmaking. Your reactions are the same as the Enterprise crew. Your mouth is agape. Admittedly, there is too much of this in the original cut, and even a bit of that in the director's cut, but it's enough that I'm left utterly impressed every time I watch this movie. And even though I know what's coming, seeing this film a bajillion times, the mystery behind V'ger is fascinating to watch. It's fascinating to watch Kirk, Decker, and Spock piece this mystery together. What is V'ger? What does it want? What does it need? Why is it doing this? Where did it even come from? And as Spock said in one of my favorite lines in film, "Captain, I am now quite convinced that we are inside a living machine." The motion picture is a flawed movie, yes, and I will not deny that. But man, is it gorgeous. And what it gets right, it gets right. And this sense of scale is certainly something the motion picture got right. In the end, go on Facebook, like AN Productions, for all up-to-date information of what we are doing there. Join our group Geeks for Geeks for all the random and insanity that goes on in there, from dank memes, dark humor, to genuine debates on what's a good movie and what's not. Subscribe to us on YouTube for all up-to-date information on our videos that we post. Stay tuned for my film FM 132.9, an independent kaiju film. And in the end, this is Adam Nice of AN Productions saying, sayonara.